Hi, and thanks again for joining me on another episode of Sealed for Good. And today we are talking about new substrates and different substrates on the market, some not so new, and the role of the primer, how important primers are with the waterproofing application. So it's almost to the point now we're finding every month that there's a new substrate that arrives onto the scene. Just the way construction is going, technology, or the new methods of waterproofing and building that are out there, and tilers and waterproofers in particular are faced with how they prepare those surfaces or how they actually work over them, and it's a critical one. This does present a challenge for everybody, the builders, the contractors, the waterproofers alike, and it raises questions on, do you know if the product, firstly, if the substrate is suitable for where it's being applied, is there a specification on how to work over it, has it been installed correctly? Specifications are important. My position on all this sort of stuff is that the manufacturer of a substrate that is supplying a product into the market should know and have a method statement or at least a spec to confirm how to waterproof and what products should be used for waterproofing. Unfortunately, I often see guys telling us about new substrates they're faced with. They've gone out on site, builders have used them, potentially either for a cost benefit or it's a trial, and there's no literature, there's no data, there's no information on how to work over it. And guys, I tell you all this, if you're waterproofing over a substrate, you are responsible. If you start to work over it, you're deemed as the person that has accepted the surface, so you do take a risk if you assume that you know what you're doing. So my advice is to check that out first, very, very important. However, so let's go on to the real point I want to go into with primers on this. Multiple different substrates being used. A lot of them are lightweight, have other benefits and advantages for being used out in the marketplace, and I'm not favouring any products over the others, but we have things now like the standard old concrete block that's still used in the market for many applications. You have timbers such as particle board flooring, plywood, they need to be wet area grades obviously. CFC sheeting, compressed fibre cement, Skyon, which is a product that's really taken off in the market throughout Australia and New Zealand for floor substrates particularly because it's a lot lighter weight than the old traditional CFC sheeting. We have things like existing tiles at times when they've got to be coated over in remedial works. Hebel is another one, Hebel panel or aerated concrete, which is commonly found. There's a few different versions of that. PVC surfaces, things like Dinsel, which we spoke about a few episodes back, and flanges, puddle flanges on site. Metals, often flashings, Zingaloom, stainless, galvanised iron can be finding its way into an area where you are waterproofing and knowing how to prepare that surface. Polystyrene, very commonly used, particularly on vertical surfaces now because of the thermal benefits, and sometimes waterproofers do need to get over those as well. Polyurethane foam, a real common one for a number of reasons now, claiming a lot of benefits with the lightweight properties, thermal properties, and also the fire retardant properties of some of them out there. And MgO, magnesium board, which we had spoken about a while back, which we're seeing out in the marketplace. So surface preparations are given. I'm not going to go there on this discussion. Surfaces must be prepared correctly, and for all these types of surfaces I just mentioned, we expect them to be clean, dust-free, latent-free, and ready to go. You need to determine if the surface or the substrate is a porous or non-porous substrate, and you can easily do that with just a water droplet test. But the membrane starts with the primer. So you need to understand which primer you're going to use. Now, Gripset, our specifications do go into a variety of different substrates that we state in our data sheets on which primers should be used on which substrates. However, if there's a substrate you come across that we haven't got a spec on or haven't got a mention of, you can ring our toll-free line 1-800-650-435 to get advice on that, or email us. But the correct primer is the critical piece. Without the right primer, you are going to compromise the application from there. That is just we often see that where membranes are put of the right thickness, they're put at the right coats, but if the primer hasn't been done properly or the wrong primer's been used, it'll just compromise everything. So get that right. And that's often going to determine the success or the failure of your system. And do not believe two things that you hear out there. One is, oh, this substrate's so good it doesn't need to be primed. That's nonsense. The other one is one primer can do every substrate. If it was that easy, believe me, we'd have the magic one and just issue it out there. But in the Gripset range, we have our Gripset GP, we have our OP, we have our E60, and we have our P10 primer, 4 primers in our range for various substrates. Look into those and check out what primer will suit the substrate you're after. The function of the primer, this is the most critical piece that people don't understand. It optimizes the adhesion to the substrate. Primarily, that is the key function of it. Secondly, it provides a key for the surface finish over the top. So, no good using a primer that might bond to the substrate, seal the surface, and then find that the membrane you're putting on top doesn't bond to that. They need to go hand in hand. So, the primer should be part of the waterproofing system. Do not use a different primer from a different membrane manufacturer. They go hand in hand together, and that is the basic system. Things like, if you're going over tiles or Skynon, for example, completely different than the sort of primer you might use on things like blockwork or plasterboard or villaboard. Very, very important. The other role of the primer is on substrates like concrete blocks or concrete. It will prevent pinholing and it improves your coverage. Don't go out there thinking that you're going to actually save money by skimping on the primer. You'll actually save money by using a primer because you get greater efficiency from your membrane coverage, particularly with the liquids. So always remember that. You won't absorb as much up and you'll get the nominal film thickness you need for the membrane. So priming is always there. And it also stabilises the surface. Okay, if you've got a surface, I'll use aerated concrete as an example, like Hebel, a bit friable, the primer will stabilise that, solidify, and then allows you to put the membrane on top without worrying about the bond being only on the surface topping where it comes off very, very easily. So important. When you select the primer, make sure that primer is suitable for the substrate, as I mentioned before. Read the data sheet, guys, okay, very important, and it should be on the packaging, but the data sheet should be the go-to always. Make sure the overlaid finishes are compatible with that primer. If it's a tiling system directly over a primer, make sure adhesive will bond to that. But like I said before, the membrane, there should be no time we use a membrane with a different priming system from a different manufacturer. If that comes up, let us know. The only times I think that may happen could be with certain sheet systems, but it should be hand in hand together. Very important. And if you need any clarification, like I said, you've got our technical department to call. We are a big believer in primers, the importance of them. They are part of all of our systems. So please, give us a yell if you need. Help is there. Thanks again for joining on this episode. If you've got any questions or comments on primers and substrates, let us know. Always interested to see or hear what's coming up in the market. You never know, you could prompt Gripset to develop a new primer for a new substrate. See you next time.